Hi everyone and welcome back to What is this weapon? You've probably noticed there's something a little bit wrong with this FN FAL. Perhaps, hopefully you have noticed that it's an FAL. Not everyone is into their 20th century firearms, but we do have a very good collection of them here. It's very short. So this is in fact an FN FAL, but it's a real nightmare grab bag of parts, which I'll try to explain in a moment. The main feature of it, and one of the reasons that we collected this, is its super short barrel. Some of you may be aware of, I think Australia, Rhodesian forces. Various people have chopped down FAL barrels to make them better sort of jungle rifles, or bush rifles, I should say. And that's obviously because short barrels are very useful in foliage or at close quarters. It's easier to bring the gun into action. The FAL is known for having a super long barrel that, you know, I mean, there are stories of British soldiers in Northern Ireland running through doorways and getting caught. Shouldn't laugh, but getting caught in the doorway. Same problem for jumping in and out of vehicles, helicopters, that kind of thing. It's perhaps the weakest aspect of the FAL, the generic FAL design. There is the para FAL, which is already substantially shorter, and indeed that's where this buttstock design comes from. But as you can see, it looks a bit weird. In fact, I may as well mention right now, this is some weird plastic piping that's been installed over the struts for reasons unknown, aesthetic presumably, and the support block that normally sits between the two struts on the FAL para is missing. I don't know that we've taken these off. Maybe it's an absolute nightmare under there, and this was just a convenient way to cover that up. But given that the whole gun has been refinished, I think this has been added to just look cool to somebody. We don't know who, unfortunately. So that is, hopefully this works. It is the standard folding mechanism with a push button here, and then this latching mechanism. It's a good solid system, and once you depress the latch and pushed down on the stock, it will fold along the side of the weapon. This one will not latch in place. That's the buttstock. But yeah, the reason for doing this, short barrel is convenient, makes the whole weapon lighter as well, but you're preserving the ballistic capability of this very powerful, relatively powerful 7.62 or 308 if you prefer cartridge. So plenty of penetration through walls or light cover compared to something like 5.56. Substantial recoil, lots of muzzle flash. Yeah, they're a dramatic type of weapon, a full power, quote unquote, battle rifle. I'm not really a fan of that term, but it's becoming popular. With a very short barrel is all sorts of wrong for most users, but there have been a few who have favoured it. So yeah, the barrel has been shortened by, I think it was 274 millimeters. So we actually have an inspection report from our armourer on this because, well, it needed looking at in detail. So the barrel's been shortened. The flash hider itself, or the flash suppressor, has also been shortened. It is a standard FAL flash suppressor, but it has been shortened. The gas block has been relocated further back, shortening this whole setup here, and the handguard is super short as well. So it gives it almost sort of cartoonish proportions. And in the process of removing and replacing this gas block here, they have completely messed up the bore. So there is burring on the inside where the gas port, where the high pressure gases are pushing up and back to drive the working parts of the gun, how a self-loading or an automatic firearm works, of course. They have, in re-drilling this, they have damaged the inside of the bore of the gun. So that's going to affect accuracy. It could even potentially cause a barrel obstruction that would cause a peak pressure, potentially even a breech explosion, the way this thing is put together. It's not great. So date-wise, it's difficult to date, but the upper receiver is of post-1973, what's known as Type 3 form for the FAL nerds. It's kind of neither here nor there, except that it does tell us that it's not a pre-1973 gun. This thing in production from the early 50s onwards, mid-50s onwards. So it's a later example, 70s, 80s, something like that. It came to us, sadly, from a source that hadn't preserved its history in a few years ago, and we believe was collected in 2009, and I believe from Optelic, from Iraq, British involvement in Iraq, but we have don't even have confirmation of that, unfortunately, and we have no history around it. But somebody in a hot and sandy place with lots of bullets flying everywhere has decided that this is their personal weapon. Now, they haven't just taken a rifle and chopped down the barrel and messed with the gas system, which is always risky in terms of reliability. They have assembled this from bits. So we have a homemade pistol grip carved out of a block of polymer. You might have spotted that, actually. It's fairly crude. The carrying handle, that's homemade. That's been quite well homemade, but nonetheless. We have the weird plastic on the butt, as mentioned. And then we have an interior mishmash of parts from different guns. Interestingly, this is what's known as a metric pattern FAL, sort of European version of the platform, as opposed to the imperial or inch pattern, which is British and Commonwealth. But there is one imperial pattern part on this, and it's the famous, in Britain certainly, and Canada and Australia, it's the L1A1 SLR, folding cocking handle, has been bodged onto this gun. The standard FAL, if this was in its original configuration, would be a big polymer knob type cocking handle on the side. This has been, interestingly, made somewhat British. It has been ground, like all of these parts have been buffed and ground to within an inch of their lives. All markings have been removed. I don't know if that's a deliberate attempt to sanitize the thing to make it, in theory, hard to track, or more likely it was just lots of parts in a rusty state and they were getting rid of all of the rust before they've then refinished it. Not a terrible job of refinishing it, to be honest. I've seen worse. And we have the marking on the magazine housing here, TEL 3661. Don't know the significance of that, but I have speculated that TEL is to do with Operation Telic, which is, as I say, the British involvement in Iraq. There are a couple of markings, I should say, other than the one in white paint that I just mentioned, and that's just the ARS selector markings that are still on the lower receiver. So not every marking has been removed. There are some markings on the bolt carrier group as well, but nothing sort of diagnostic of who's done this work or anything like that. Can't even say with any real certainty which countries these parts have come from. I mean, the majority of FALs are actually Belgian-made, even if it's for a contract for a different country. But yeah, we know so little about this thing. Now there is the internal parts are a real mishmash of bits and inappropriate bits. In fact, there's a broken spring here that was retrieved from inside and replaced with one so that further damage was not sustained. But we've retained the original one in a bag, which does sort of speak to the less than ideal gunsmithing that's been done to this thing. So, in terms of what's wrong with it, let me read from my colleague's inspection report. So, we have piston and spring deficient, hammer, spring, housing and stay deficient, firing pin, retaining pin distorted and stiff to remove, firing pin spring weak, not original spring, extractor spring weak, barrel puckered either side of gas block. As I mentioned, the damage to the barrel. End of hammer is badly bruised by contact with selector shaft. Recoil springs weak/incorrect pattern. Body locking catch spring too long, replaced. Body locking catch distorted due to long spring. Firing pin protrusion exceeds 0.058 inches. And then we have the gauges that don't fit as they should. The butt arm spacer deficient, butt assembly and catch worn. I could tell that when I operated it, it just sort of flops about. So now, despite all of that, bizarrely, this thing actually is in headspace. Headspace is essentially how the cartridge fits the chamber, and if there's too much of a gap there, your gun might blow up. If there's not enough of a gap, the bolt won't close because the cartridge is preventing it. So amazingly, despite everything wrong with this thing, it is actually in correct headspace, which is probably more by luck than judgment. So why have we collected this piece of junk? I think I can politely put it. Well, as I say, we don't have any of these improvised cut-down barrel FALs that have been somewhat popular in 20th century history. And more importantly, from a technical point of view, this will chamber and fire a round, possibly more than one round. We haven't dared test it. So it will fire, but it is not in a safe condition. So in terms of instructional purposes, it's a great example of, if you find this thing in the field somewhere, yes, it might chamber and fire around, but don't, because the thing might blow up on you. I believe the space people call it rapid unscheduled disassembly. Yeah, it's not ideal. In fact, I've even had, I've hesitated to remove the magazine because it gets stuck. It's come off there okay. So if you can't even install the magazine and take it off reliably, you're not going to have a good day operating this thing. And needless to say, even without all of those defects, accuracy is going to suffer with the reduced sight radius between the distance between the front and rear sight. It means that every little bit of movement translates to way more movement of your front sight and less accuracy that way. And if the cartridge isn't developing its full ballistic potential or anywhere near, it's not affecting accuracy per se, but out to a longer distance, you're going to get more bullet drop as gravity and air resistance affects the bullet. This is why people will say that shorter barreled guns are less accurate. They're technically not, but it does affect accuracy at distance. So, not the best thing we've shown you on the channel, but something a bit different. And it also allows me to briefly speak about the right arm of the free world, or the free world's right arm, a phrase you'll see online quite a bit. Now that's reflects some reality. This was there was no standard NATO rifle, and never has been, just a cartridge, more than one cartridge. But if there was ever a standard NATO rifle to compare to the Kalashnikov, it probably would have been the FAL. It was extremely popular, although Germany did abandon it as the G1 and went to the G3 with a completely different operating system and design, but a lot of other countries did go with it. The Commonwealth history as well. So that's where the term was coined, but it's not really an organic turn of phrase. It was actually the title of a book, a really good book on the FAL that I recommend you check out for more detail on the type. But our use of that phrase comes from a book written as the gun was still in service and very popular, but things were starting to wind down. Okay guys, thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed that one. As always, you know where we are hopefully by now with our 3 sites that you can visit if you're in the UK or visiting the UK. Otherwise, our social media, we have Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and I never remember to say this, so do like and subscribe as well. And you can also see me over on the GameSpot channel talking nonsense about guns. But we'll see you again next time on the Royal Armouries channel.